The night before my daughter's engagement party, I heard my dead husband's voice on her phone. It was nearly midnight in Astoria, Oregon. The river was slick and black outside my kitchen window, the kind of winter water that eats sound and gives nothing back. I'd been trimming eucalyptus for the centerpieces, tasting copper on my tongue from too much coffee, when Lila's phone lit up on the butcher block. She'd left it charging after a late run to the bakery. The screen showed unknown. I'm not the kind of mother who snoops. I set boundaries and I keep them. But the call went to voicemail. The little red dot blinked, and something in me, a small, hard thing with my husband's handwriting in its bones, unclenched enough to reach across the counter and press play. Static, a faint breath, and then a voice I had buried 5 years ago came up through that tiny speaker, like a hand from cold earth. "Nora, if you're hearing this, I couldn't stop it in time. I'm not dead. Don't let her marry him. It's worse than you think." The line went silent. My knees bent without my permission. I caught the edge of the counter and felt the eucalyptus stems bite my palm. The room tilted and then righted itself. Outside, a foghorn lifted once, low and patient, as if the river had some opinion about how lives should be steered. I didn't realize I was crying until a salt drop hit the screen and skated sideways. Mark's voice had always done that to me, cut through everything, even the sentences I told myself I lived by. 5 years since the Coast Guard declared his fishing boat lost. 5 years since we stood in a chapel with no casket. 5 years since I taught myself to sleep on the cold side of the bed anyway. 5 years, and suddenly, he was on my daughter's phone, telling me not to let her marry the man she loved. It took me 3 tries to stop the recording from replaying. Each time I heard, "I'm not dead," my body performed the same little betrayal, hope blooming and curdling in one breath. I set the phone down carefully, the way you set a baby or a bomb. Then I went still and listened for footsteps upstairs. The old bungalow answered with soft, familiar groans, the radiator coughing, the wind fingering the eaves, the house remembering us. No movement from Lila's room. On the stove, a pot of vanilla syrup simmered gently, the smell of it reaching backward to our first Christmas here, before the bad luck, back when Mark would pull Lila into the kitchen by her elbows and dance her around the table. I turned off the flame. The syrup clicked and went quiet. My name is Nora Whitman. I own a bookshop cafe on Commercial Street called Tide and Spine. Astoria is a town that knows about ghosts. They're baked into the pier pilings, stacked like cordwood in the old canneries, trapped in the rafters of the houses leaning toward the river as if they can't stand to look away. We don't flinch at fog. We flinch at the sudden betrayals. Boats that don't come back, phone calls in the night. We make our peace with tides. I picked up the phone again. The voicemail was time-stamped at 11:34 p.m. today. I touched the number. It was nothing, a string of zeros and eights, impossible, like a bad joke. I opened the call details and saw nothing that made sense. No contact, no carrier, the originating location listed as restricted. The voice did not care that the metadata refused to be polite. It sat in the kitchen with me like a person. It had shape and weight and a mouth, and it had said words that unbuttoned 5 years of hard-won closure. I thought of Lila asleep in her room under the sloped ceiling where, at 12, she taped glow-in-the-dark stars. 23 now, pale and beautiful and serious, prone to kindness, at once older than her father and younger than the girl who used to leave crusts in the sink. She loved Evan. She loved the way he asked her questions and actually listened. She loved the way he cooked Sunday sauce from scratch because his Brooklyn-raised mother insisted it was a sacrament. She loved that he came to the shop to walk her home. No performance, no swagger. He was a real estate analyst based out of Portland, working hybrid. Always 1 foot in the city and 1 in our little town. He had a quick grin and a nervous tick of tapping his fingers 3 times against his thigh when he thought no one was looking. He was cautious about money, polite with the old men who clustered in our back room and argued about baseball, tender with our shop dog who had arthritis and hated the rain. 2 hours ago, while I was steaming milk and promising myself not to overcomplicate the dessert table, my daughter had leaned across the counter and said, "Remember to not worry, okay?" and I had kissed her forehead and lied and said, okay. I should have woken her then. I should have walked down the hallway and put the phone in her hands and said, sweetheart, I need you to listen to something. But the shape of Mark's words kept rolling over me, heavy as surf. It was like staring into dark water and trying to guess what had moved. There is a kind of anger that feels like nausea and a kind of fear that feels like whiplash. This was both, wrapped around a center I recognized, that quiet bolt of intuition that had saved me more than once in my life, and once, the night Mark didn't come home, had thrown me to my knees and made me pray. I wiped my cheeks with the heel of my hand and pressed my fingertip flat on the counter to stop it shaking. Then I did what I have done in every catastrophe since my father taught me to check a stuck engine before you curse at it. I took a breath, found paper, and made a list. Don't wake Lila. Not yet. Don't call Evan, not ever, at least not first. Call Caleb. I hadn't said my brother-in-law's name out loud in 2 years. Not since the last time he showed up at the shop unannounced and stood in the doorway with that steady cop gaze he couldn't shed, asking if I needed anything. A weird question from a man who had once refused to sit at my table for Thanksgiving. Caleb and Mark had been brothers only by blood by the end. Mark always thought Caleb judged him. Caleb always thought Mark was a beautiful liar. They weren't both wrong. He'd left Portland PD after something went sideways with a partner and a brass I didn't understand. After that, he took his license and went private. Missing persons, asset searches, small-town divorces for sad men with new haircuts. He kept his truck clean and his vices quiet. We'd been polite at birthdays, then Mark died, and we weren't anything at all. I scrolled to a number I'd kept but never used. My thumb hovered. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring, voice calm and awake. Whitman. It's Nora. Nora, he repeated, the syllables cautious. Then softer. It's late. You okay? I looked at Lila's phone. No. Tell me. I told him the bare bones, the unknown number, the voice, the sentence that had cracked me open. I said Mark's name and forgot to swallow and then remembered how. Silence lived on Caleb's end for 5 seconds, maybe 6. You can measure a person's strength by the shape of their silence. His was the kind you can put weight on. Text me the voicemail, he said. I'll run it for artifacting. What does that mean? Layers. Whether it was recorded once and sent or composited, whether the metadata's been scrubbed by a smart kid or replaced by a dumb app. He paused. Nora, I need you to hear me. Whatever this is, don't wake Lila yet. I want to touch this thing before it gets bigger. It already felt as big as the sky, but I understood what he meant. I sent him the file. My hands had stopped shaking. That scared me more than the shaking. 15, he said. 15 what? Minutes. I'm close. Caleb, it's midnight. I'll bring coffee, promise. He hung up. I stood and listened to the house again. For a few seconds, I let myself imagine what it would be like if Mark opened the back door with his old laugh and said, "It's just me." With the imagination comes the second, inevitable thing, shame. You don't miss someone who lied to you. You don't want what killed you once, except sometimes you do. If what you want is not the person at all, but the part of you that mattered when you belonged to the life they stood at the center of. Grief can be like this. Less a wound and more a door you keep going back to. Out of habit, palms open to the idea that the knob will turn. I put on a kettle. I washed my face. I undid the secure knot of myself enough to be imperfect when Caleb got there. His knock was quiet. He came in already scanning the edges of the room, big shoulders in a canvas jacket, jaw shadowed, the same mouth Mark had, the one that always made me think of a stubborn boy. It was like opening a window into an old photograph. "You look the same," I lied. "You look tired," he said, which was not kind, but was not unkind either. He set a thermos on the counter. "What'd I miss on the drive?" He nodded to the phone. "I didn't play it again." He glanced up as if that was a point in my favor, then slid a flash drive out of his pocket. "Open your laptop?" I did. We sat shoulder to shoulder at my kitchen table. He put the voicemail through a program with a name that made me think of eyes more than code. Lines and needles shivered on the screen. He listened twice with his eyes closed. The third time, he leaned back and breathed out once, like a person who has just found a nail by stepping on it. "It's him," he said, "not a deep fake. If it is, it's the kind with his ghost driving." I know. It's layered weird, not like a normal voice memo. Looks like it was stored, then initiated by an event. What does that mean in English? Something triggered the send. A phrase, a date, a locator ping. I can't tell which. There are 2 signatures I don't like. He tapped the screen gently. "See how the file header resets here? It suggests relay. Not 5 minutes ago, not even 5 hours. Days, maybe more. Like it's been sitting somewhere waiting for a green light. How do you know that?" "I'm good at being bored," he said, "and I collect people I can text in the middle of the night without needing to apologize in the morning." He folded his hands. "The origin's masked. That's intentional. But the masking isn't elegant, and Mark never did inelegance. So either someone did this on purpose to keep me from seeing easily, or the software is a cheap coffin made to look expensive. I don't understand any of that." "Mark's alive," he said, "and he sent this. There are other possibilities. We can chase those to be safe, but that's the one that earns the oxygen in the room." My stomach did a small, rude gymnastic movement. He said, "Don't let her marry him." He used the present tense. He knows about the party tomorrow. "Tonight," Caleb said, checking the clock. "It's already today." He considered the table. If Mark is alive, where did he go for 5 years? And why this? Why now? "You think this is about Evan?" "I think Mark never let anything happen to his family that he hadn't decided was useful to him first. I think the last time he looked me in the eye, he had a story on his tongue that wasn't attached to the truth. And I think if he wanted to warn you about Evan, he could have done it in person unless someone or something made that impossible." He paused. "What do you know about Evan's people?" "Mom in New York. Father died when he was 6. Likes baseball, hates cilantro. Pays his tax preparer on time and tips my baristas 20%. Says please and thank you. I want to like him." "You do like him." "I mean, I want to still like him tomorrow." Caleb nodded like that was fair. He got up and walked to the window. He looked at the river the way a man looks at a closed door when he's trying to decide whether to knock or kick. "That night," he said without turning, "when they found nothing." "Don't," I said. "It came out smaller than I wanted it to." He adjusted, moved back, sat down. "Okay," he said. "Then we're here. Mark's voice, the warning, the party. We don't go to the cops until we have a shape. The last thing we need is a uniform telling us to settle down." "You think we're in danger?" "I think information is expensive," he said. "And if Mark knows something that makes Evan look like an investment with bad risk, someone might prefer that you never shop for the return." I stood because I couldn't sit. I poured water I didn't need and made tea I didn't want. I looked down the hallway toward Lila's room, toward the collection of shared jokes and thrift store dresses and mugs she stole from my kitchen because she liked the weight of them. When she was 8, she used to slip her small hand into mine without asking. At 23, she had learned to announce her needs like a person who believed in being heard. "Caleb," I said, "if Mark is alive, I need to hit him with something heavy." "Get in line." We didn't smile. It wasn't a joke we earned. He drew a notebook nearer, a battered thing with a leather cover he'd had since the year after Mark and I got married. He flipped to a clean page. "Start with anything that seemed off with Evan. Little things, shadow thoughts. No shame in being petty." Last week he asked which bank held Mark's safe deposit box. Caleb's head lifted an inch. I brushed it off. He said he wanted to make a shadow box for the wedding with things of Mark's. I swallowed. It was sweet. And his pen found the page. And he asked whether we had a copy of the old deed to the house. Why? Calm like a hand over a horse's eyes. He said he wanted to make sure our names were protected when we added him to the insurance. Caleb's pen stopped moving. He tapped the barrel twice against the notebook. 3 times would have been Evan. "What else?" he said. He always parks a block away like he's being considerate. A black SUV sits at the corner, sometimes with a guy who definitely isn't reading the newspaper on his phone, like he says he is when I walk the dog at midnight, and once, when I hugged Evan goodbye, I smelled the ocean on his collar, even though he said he'd been in Beaverton all day. Caleb was already up. He went to the window and looked into the street. "SUV? Not tonight." I came to stand beside him. We saw a reflection first. Two faces that had forgotten how to rest. The fog had thickened. A few houses down, someone's porch light held its own. "You'll hate this," he said, "but you need to call your bank at 9 and confirm that no one has tried to move on your lines of credit." I closed my eyes for a second and saw the ocean move. He wouldn't. "I need you to stop offering people the benefit of a doubt they didn't earn." "I taught high school English," I said automatically. "I can't help it." He made a little sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "No, you helped kids who stole their way into a story because they believed they could be better. You don't help men who get into your family's bone marrow by saying their mothers worked hard, so they must be good." His mother did work hard. "I believe you," he said, "and she deserves something better than whatever this is." We went quiet. In the next room, the old clock my father repaired ticked itself taller. "When should we wake her?" I asked. "Sunrise." "And tell her what?" "The truth. The piece of it we can name. Mark is alive." "Yes." "And her fiancé might be a thief. Or worse, he could be someone else's son." I looked at him. He didn't look away. At dawn, I stood in the doorway of my daughter's room and watched her sleep with one arm flung over her head like she was making a small opening for light. I had forgotten that at this angle she looks like she did at 8, that the small human who opened her fingers in a classroom to whisper a rescued ladybug safe is still inside the 23-year-old woman who will give a person an extra hour of her day for free if they look like they're carrying something too heavy. "Lila," I said, "Hey, baby, wake up." She turned and blinked at me, and I watched my heart do the thing it has done every day since she was born. Hurt because love has no insurance policy. "What's wrong?" she asked. Her voice came up through sleep like it was walking out of fog. "I need you to listen," I said, "and I need you not to be brave for me. If you need to cry, do it. If you need to yell, I'll stand still." She sat up, pushed hair behind her ear, and reached for my hand automatically. I started the voicemail. Her face didn't move until it moved all at once, like someone had cut a rope. "That's Dad," she said. Quiet, no question. "It is," I answered. It felt like lying and telling the truth at the same time. "Caleb's here." She looked past me and saw him, nodded, pulled a sweatshirt over her tank top, and tucked her knees up under her chin. "He's alive?" "We think so." "And he's warning us about Evan," she said. And the way she said Evan's name was a new thing in the world. "Why?" "I don't know yet," I said. "We're going to find out." She put both feet on the floor, stood and hugged me. Not to be held, I realized, but to hold me. Then she stepped back and turned to Caleb. "What do you need?" He looked at her like she was someone whose time should never be wasted. "Tell me anything that didn't feel right with Evan. The tiny stuff. The stuff you decided to not decide about." She sat at the edge of her bed and thought. She'd always been good at that, refusing to say the first convenient sentence when there was a harder, more accurate one, still figuring out where to put its feet in her mouth. "He's careful about his car," she said. "More careful than makes sense for a 10-year-old Audi. He uses 2 phones, which isn't automatically a sin, but he has a third in his glove compartment." She swallowed. "The first night he stayed over, he asked if I ever get mail from Dad's old company. He tried to make it sound casual. He said he was curious because shipping companies fascinate him." "North Point," I said. Caleb had written it already. "North Point Logistics," he said. "I know them." "You do?" I asked. "You live long enough with one foot on a dock and you hear the wrong names more than once. North Point got investigated after Mark's boat went down. Nothing stuck. Nothing ever stuck." "What does investigated mean?" Lila asked, sarcasm like a flare. "It means a federal guy with good hair asked polite questions and a few people took vacation," Caleb said. "And then the news cycle did what news cycles do." "I have another thing," Lila said, eyes on her knees. "I should have told you, Mom. Please don't be mad." She took a breath. 3 months ago, I found an email in Dad's old account. It was flagged and hidden. It had a single sentence, "Not yet," and a postscript, "Tell Nora I never learned how to like cilantro." I thought it was spam. Because who writes like that? But it had his cadence. I applied for a password reset and the recovery number sent the code to a burner. "I didn't tell you because..." Her voice failed. She found it again. "Because you finally looked like a person who wasn't being asked to survive a thing every minute of every day." I opened my mouth. Nothing decent came out. The shame that lived under my breastbone made itself comfortable. "Don't apologize," she said. I should have said something. I'm saying it now. Okay, I managed. Okay. Caleb's pen had stopped. He was watching us with that expression he wore when he had put the correct number of bullets in a sentence and was waiting to see where to aim. Did you reply to the email? He asked. No, she said. I deleted it maybe 5 times. It kept coming back to my brain, like chewing gum on a shoe. He nodded. Good image. I'm mad at him, she whispered, and the quiet hardness of that confession hurt me and healed me in the same exhale. I'm mad that I would still run if he called me, and I'm mad that I'd trip. The 3 of us sat in that small square of morning where the light was a friend again, not a question. The dog pushed open the door with his white muzzle and sneezed, like grief wasn't a country he visited anymore. Here's what we do, Caleb said, without preamble or moralizing. We bait the hook. No, I said, we don't use my kid as bait. She's not bait, he said mildly. She's a witness. If Evan is what we think he might be, he's trying to get something Mark left behind. He'll accelerate today because he'll smell danger in the air and call it weather. What does he want? Lila asked. A ledger, I said, and the guess felt like memory. Or a key. Mark always loved keys. Caleb's face told me I wasn't wrong enough to stop. Mark would have hidden something in 3 pieces, he said. He didn't love puzzles because he liked games. He loved them because he liked control. He would have left 1 piece where only Nora could find it, one where only someone who had his eyes could see it, and one in a place no one would accidentally trip over. In English, Lila said. He left something here, Caleb said, tapping the table. He left something in a place Lila knows, and he left something that requires a password not yet invented by a person who doesn't like cilantro. The lighthouse, she said suddenly. Dad and I would go to the light at Cape Disappointment when I was little and count barges and pretend to name them. He used to say, when you want to find your way home, look for the impossible name. He would make me spell Pharos's, just because he liked the shape of the word in my mouth. Caleb and I looked at each other. Some days the universe drops a small, stupid joke in your lap and asks if you want to see what happens when it rolls. What about here, he asked me. What did he hide in this house? Anger, I said, and the honesty startled me. And once, a jar of quarters under the floorboard by the piano. Let's start with the piano, he said gently. We moved the instrument like 2 people who needed to move something bigger than themselves and liked that this time it had weight and wheels. The floorboards beneath were old. One near the wall had 2 nail heads polished smooth. I lifted it with my fingers the way my father taught me. Pressure on the heel. Wrist turned inward. The board gave. Inside the hollow was a little world, a tin with a hinged lid and the smell of old paper. I held it and did not open it. Lila stood with her arms folded, her mouth a seam. You're not surprised, I said to Caleb without looking at him. I'm familiar with Whitmans and their hobbies, he said. Open it. I did. Inside lay a key wrapped in waxed paper, a small USB drive the color of cheap wine, and a Polaroid of a younger Mark squinting into late afternoon light, holding up a fish as if he couldn't stand to be living such a cliché. On the back of the photo, in his handwriting, was a single word, Pharos. That's a lighthouse, Lila said. We just said that. It's also the name of a file, Caleb said, lifting the USB carefully, and maybe the name of a savings account at a bank where the tellers wear pearls. You think there's money, I said dully. I think there's a map and a list and a number, he said, and I think if we open this, someone will come to our house who does not bring cinnamon rolls. What if we tell the police now? Lila asked. We will, he said, after we make a few copies. If this is what I think it is, it's evidence and bait. We handle it with gloves until we want it to be a grenade. Caleb, I said, I'll be careful, he said, I swear it. It is one thing to be careful. It is another for that carefulness to be enough. At noon, after I'd called the bank and learned 2 things I didn't want to, that someone had tried to access our insurance files and that someone else had asked a brittle question about whether our safe deposit box allowed a secondary user, I put on a dress I didn't feel worthy of and arranged hydrangeas that smelled like we were pretending it was summer. The engagement party was at the old cannery hall we rented because the owner owed me for a winter of book club rentals. Exposed brick and strings of bulbs, the river outside like an animal watching through the windows. Evan arrived early, hands in pockets, hair perfect in the way that made me think he had 2 mirrors and a plan. He hugged me, light, like he didn't want to be accused of anything. He smelled like mint and the inside of a new car. He looked past me toward Lila. The light that started on his face never reached his eyes. "You look beautiful," he said. And I believed he believed that sentence. "Thank you," my daughter said. And I believed she wasn't sure what to do with any of this. Caleb had positioned himself near the bar with the kind of invisibility men like him cultivate. Present enough to seem useful, bland enough to be ignored. He'd made 3 copies of the USB. One sat in a folder in his inside pocket. One was in a safety deposit box I didn't know about until today. One, "It's in my bra," I told him earlier, and he blinked and said, "Fair, because some days you choose the only reliable safe you own." We had planned nothing dramatic. We were not going to play a slideshow with captions. I was not going to stand up and speak like a woman whose hysteria could be measured in lumens. The plan, like all good plans, was quieter than my fear and less interesting than the story I wanted to tell about my own courage. The plan was to get Evan to ask the question he had been circling for months and record him doing it while the river listened. Guests arrived. My neighbor in his worn Carhartt, my baristas dressed in something that looked like a bet they made with each other to see who could wear velvet better. My best friend Tasha in red lipstick because she never let weather tell her what to be. Evan's mother flew in from JFK and hugged me like she thought Americans broke by hand. She had soft hands and a stern mouth and a grief in her eyes I recognized. Her kiss smelled like anise. She held Lila's face and said, "I want you to be happy," and I realized she had not said, "You make my son happy." "The speech is at 7, I told the room. "Please eat before then so you don't cry on an empty stomach and blame me." Evan laughed in the right place. He moved among his friends, 2 from his firm, 1 from grad school, a woman who touched his elbow every time she made a joke as if she needed to tether him to the room. He made sure to drink the right number of drinks, 1 to be friendly, none to be sloppy. Caleb watched. I watched. Lila watched both of us watching and then set her jaw and went to sit with Evan's mother, whose name was Maureen, and who began to tell her a story about moving to America with a suitcase the size of a toddler and a loaf of bread wrapped in a towel so the customs dog wouldn't tell the truth. At 6:15, while I refilled the platter of olives and pretended to care about the napkins, Evan came to stand too casually at the edge of the curtain that separated the kitchen from the hall. "Hey," he said, "can I ask you something?" "It's dumb, never mind." "Ask," I said, because if there is anything I am, it is stubborn, and if there is anything I have learned, it is that dumb questions carry knives. He rubbed thumb and forefinger together, 3 taps on his thigh. I was going through some of my stuff for renter's insurance, and it occurred to me, this is going to sound weird, but does your family still have a safe deposit box? We're adding Lila to my account, and the bank asked if either of us had assets stored off-site. It's stupid, ignore me. It can't be stupid if a bank asked it, I said. He smiled like a student being praised in a class he's already ahead in. Right, he said. Caleb was there before the pause finished being a pause. Evan, he said, like it was a word he liked the shape of. Can I borrow Nora for a second? Sorry. He cut his eyes toward the hallway, a little the way men do when they see a fight and are deciding whether to be heroes or to be the version of themselves their wives won't leave. You got a minute? He asked me. Of course, I said. My smile was a thing with stitching. We walked into the dim corridor by the office. I heard string lights hum like insects. I smelled the river, urn coffee, anxiety. Caleb stood with his back to the wall. He tilted his head. Your guy just asked about the box. That's the 3rd time. Noted. Well, let him ask you again, he said. He wants you to tell him without him asking. I'm so tired, I said. It came out like a prayer the wrong God would answer. I know, he said. One more thing. What? Maureen looks like a person who left someone in a country made of stairs, he said. Talk to her. Why? Because she'll tell you the truth if you don't make her ask for permission to give it. I found Maureen at a high-top table with my friend Tasha, both women laughing like they had just told an old man to sit down. I put a hand on the back of the empty chair. May I asked. Please, Maureen said. Her accent had lived 2 lives. She had dressed simply, which made me like her. She looked like a person who knew that strings of pearls do not impress a river. "This is lovely," she said, and I knew the word she meant was kind. "You raised a good son," I said. My tongue burned a little. She said. She looked at me like she had a ledger of her own and had just found a bad column. "I raised a boy who cried when he lost at cards. He became a man who stops when he sees a woman trying to carry more than she should. The rest he learned from a country that tells young men to make math where feelings should go." Tasha excused herself to check on a playlist she pretended not to care about. Maureen waited until she was gone. Then she folded her napkin in half. "My son has made choices I'm not proud of," she said. "He tells me he makes those choices so he can provide. I asked who he thinks taught him that provision comes from how much you can carry on your back without complaint. He told me I did." Her mouth tightened. "I made a mistake teaching my son that suffering is a virtue." "I don't think that's the mistake you made," I said. "I think you taught him to be strong. Someone else taught him that strength looks like a bad man with money." We watched Evan across the room. He laughed at something a little too quickly, a little like there was a script. "I have a rule," she said. "The first time you are surprised by a man is his. The second time is yours." "My husband died," I said, 5 years ago. Tonight his voice called my daughter to warn her about yours." She didn't flinch. She took that sentence like it was a coat she'd wear if it rained. "Then listen," she said. "People in love hear the melody and forget to listen to the tempo." The speeches started. Tasha told a story about Lila painting the bathroom a blue, so serious we all felt less dramatic in it. Evan's colleague told a story about spreadsheets and friendship that was shorter than it could have been. I got up and looked out at my daughter and the man she loved, and I told a story about the time she ate a whole lemon like an apple, because she decided the best way to learn about something was to let it hurt you. The room made the sound rooms make when you've made them feel something they won't admit. I raised a glass. I sat. Evan stood. He took the microphone with a little flourish like he wanted the metal to be part of the picture. He talked about Lila's laugh, and it was accurate. He talked about her hands, and it was tender. He did not talk about my husband. It felt deliberate. I could have forgiven that. I could forgive anything except the next thing. He put his hand in his pocket. He took out a small key on a ring, shiny as a lie. "There's one more thing," he said lightly. "We're a modern couple, but I'm old-fashioned about some things. I wanted to ask Nora for something from Mark's life to bring into our life, something to honor, not to hoard." He smiled, triumphant. "If it's possible, I'd like to borrow the key to Mark's safe deposit box, temporarily." It was a beautiful maneuver. He didn't ask me for access. He asked me for permission to honor a ghost. He did it in public because generosity hates to look like refusal. He did it in front of a mother who believes in ritual, a room that wants to clap when a man performs being decent. My child looked at me like she was holding a cliff in both hands. I stood. The microphone made an ugly sound, like swallowing. "That's a lovely idea," I said. "Here's an equally lovely counter-proposal. We swap keys. I give you my father's house key." I reached into my purse and held nothing up the way an actor holds fake jewelry. "And you give me yours." The room laughed. I smiled and kept smiling and then let the smile go as if it were expensive and I could not afford to keep it. "I'm not joking," I said into the quiet. "Keys carry responsibilities. If you want one of mine, I want one of yours." Evan blinked, a half second too long. He recovered elegantly. He took a step forward and placed his key on the table as if he were performing for a jury. "Of course," he said. Caleb moved like a tide no one had remembered to track and was there, palm over the key, pocketing it with a politeness so old it looked like apology. "I'll copy it," he said to Evan, as if that sort of thing happened at every engagement party between beer and cake. "Be back in 10. "Actually," I said, because sometimes courage borrows you for 10 seconds and does not tell you what it plans to do with your mouth. "Let's take a small break. I think the bride would like to dance with her mother." I stepped off the little dais and put my arms around my daughter. She put her chin on my shoulder. We swayed to something I didn't recognize and then did. It was the song Mark and I had chosen for our wedding because the DJ refused to play what I wanted, which was silence and the sound of our breathing. I turned my head and put my mouth close to Lila's ear. "If I say run, run," I said. "Okay," she breathed. Caleb was already at the back door. Tasha was with him because of course she was. She had a copy of the USB and a list of numbers I could call if my building caught fire, and I didn't want to bother the fire department with their day. "Go," I mouthed. She went. 10 minutes can be someone's entire life. In that 10 minutes, Caleb used the borrowed key to get into Evan's car and discovered nothing because men like Evan get paid to know that women like me still believe in glove compartments. He opened the trunk and found a duffel with cables that don't belong to computers you bring to dinner. He returned to the hall with a small look on his face, like he had discovered exactly the thing he did not want to, and it had used his name. He stood by the far wall. Evan raised his glass again. He made another joke. He breathed. He smiled. He was either the boy his mother raised or the man another man had hired. It is possible to be both. That is how lives get broken. It happened slowly and all at once. The front door opened. A gust of river came in like a person who had walked faster than they should have and regretted nothing about the sprint. And then Mark was there. He was thinner. He was grayer. He was alive. The room moved the way rooms move when a story reached up and tipped them over. A woman gasped. Someone said, "Jesus." My friend Tasha put a hand over her mouth in the universal human sign for "please don't make me cry in public." Evan did not turn his head at first. Then he did, and his face did something I will not forget. It rearranged into relief and dread at the same time. He knew my husband. He knew the man he had asked me to honor. He had known him living. Mark looked like someone who had walked 30 miles without water and then decided he might as well do 30 more. He saw Lila and did not weep. He saw me and did not run. He saw Caleb and looked like he had bitten into something he thought was an apple that was a fist. He took 3 steps into the room and then stopped because no one had told his legs that the floor was a thing you trusted. "I'm sorry," he said. Not to me or to Lila, but to the river, I think. "I'm sorry. I couldn't not come." "Couldn't not," Caleb murmured, because he collects words the way other men collect coins. "Listen to the doubling." Maureen stood slowly. She put her hand on Evan's arm like a question. He removed it like an answer. He took a breath the way a man does before he jumps or lies. He stepped forward. "Mark," he said, "we said noon." "You said noon," Mark said, and it was like hearing somebody else inhabit your favorite line of poetry. "I said I'd come when I could. I'm here." "You can't." "I can," Mark said. He looked around the room like a person checking for exits, which he was. Then he made a decision. He looked at me. "Nora," he said, "I made so many mistakes you can use them as pavement. This one I made on purpose. I stayed alive. I did it because if I didn't, the men who hired the men who worked at North Point would have taken me out of the river and put me in a place where the river couldn't hear me anymore. They didn't want me dead because they loved me. They wanted me quiet because I knew which dock the trucks used at 3 a.m. that their manifest didn't name. And you didn't tell me," I said. I didn't recognize my own voice. "Not one word, not one. If I told you, you would have looked for me," he said. "And if you looked, they would have found you first. And if they found you first, I would have told them anything to undo the next 30 seconds. The room was quiet the way hospital corridors are at 4 a.m. when big decisions are made by tired people. The river touched the glass, curious but not helpful. Evan took another step. "You had one job," he said to Mark, and his voice went flat. "You were supposed to stay gone." "There it is," Caleb said softly. "To nobody. To me. To whoever needed to hear it as badly as I did. There's the real man." "What do you want?" I asked Evan. My hands were very still. If I thought about them, they would shake, so I didn't. "My orders changed," he said, and the way he said orders did not make him a soldier, but the kind of employee who wears suits to change locks. "They want the ledger now. They don't want the copy. They want the original with the notations and the grease stain and the initials a man leaves when he thinks about how hard it is to carry a lie into the daylight." "They," I said. "Who's they?" Evan smiled a little like he wanted to see if I could keep up. Graham Keene, he said. Your husband's old friend, the one who taught him how to count the part of a shipment that isn't on a bill of lading. Mark flinched. It was small. It was enough. He sent you to my daughter, I said. That fact rearranged itself as it found words. To be her fiancé. To be her fiancé, Evan repeated politely. To find the peace Mark would leave with the girl he loved, because good men leave women with work, and bad men leave them with secrets disguised as work. Evan, Maureen said quietly, what did you do? He didn't look at her. That, more than anything, told me who he had chosen to be. Caleb was moving. Not obvious, but deliberate. He was already closer to the little dais, to the part of the room that had a panel you could pull back to reveal a quiet corridor lined with brooms and a door that opened to the alley where the dumpsters are. He touched his phone once without looking at it. He had sent a single word to a contact who owed him 4 favors and counted debts like love. Now. Lila, Mark said, his voice breaking on the last vowel like he'd landed on a stone in a riverbed he hadn't memorized. I told you once that the point of a compass is not to tell you which way to go, but to remind you that you get to choose between 4 directions every day. I chose wrong for a long time. I'm trying to choose right in the only ways that are left. You don't get to ask me for anything, she said. You had 5 years and you gave me 1 sentence. Not yet. If this is another not yet, say it now so I know who I'm burying tomorrow. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He nodded. That's fair. The front door opened again. 2 men walked in wearing suits that wanted to be invisible. They carried nothing in their hands and a lot in their shoulders. Graham Keene was not with them because men like Graham don't go places until after someone else has done the part that makes you lose sleep. The shorter man checked the corners the way rats do. He was comfortable in old buildings. The taller one smiled at me like we had met at Rotary. He had pale eyes. Evening, the tall one said. He could have sold me a car in a former life. We're here to collect something that belongs to someone who is impatient. You're interrupting an engagement party, I said. Do you want cake or just the weapon? See, he said to the shorter man. I like her. He turned to me. We don't want cake, we want the ledger. What ledger? I asked. He laughed, a sound without throat. The one Mark kept because he wanted to be a good man with a bad job, he said. The one that would keep your family safe until it didn't. Caleb's contact was good. The first 2 police cruisers slid to the curb out front without their lights. The officers who stepped inside were the kind whose uniforms fit like habits. They took in the scene. Party, strangers, man presumed dead, emotions, and moved toward the men with a slowness that looked like caution and was respect for leverage. It's a private event, the tall man said mildly. We have an invitation. He took a single step and the shorter one took the other. They had choreographed this. He lifted his jacket just enough to show a ghost of a thing that the law has names for, and I don't. We're all here for the same story, he said. Let's make it a short one. I would like to pretend that what I did next came from some deep well of courage. The truth is more embarrassing. I was sick of being a room that other people walked into and decided to decorate. I was tired of men with quiet hands telling the middle of my sentences who they belonged to. The tiredness became bravery, not because bravery is noble, but because sometimes the body borrows the quickest available weapon, and it happens to look like a spine. I stepped forward. Evan, I said, keeping my eyes on the tall man, did you tell Graham that you found the USB? The way the tall man blinked told me exactly how the next 2 minutes would go. He did not like surprises. He especially did not like them in rooms with cameras and witnesses, and a mother who had just remembered she wasn't one of his employees. USB, he said, the word like a swear in a language he didn't respect. Evan didn't answer. He looked at the floor. I asked you a question, I told him. Answer my question in front of your mother. He lifted his head and did the smallest lick of his lips like a boy. Yes, he said. I told him. Is that why you asked me for a key in front of my friends? I asked. Because you were practicing? Nora, the tall man said pleasantly. We don't need this theater. We just need the thing. Caleb moved then. Less a movement than a math problem, he finished. He took 3 strides. hit the emergency bar on the side exit, and shouted one word. The fire alarm went off like a city. Sprinklers came to life with the kind of enthusiasm only insensible machines have. People did what people do. They ducked, they screamed, they laughed. The officers moved at once, bodies between the men and the door. The shorter man reached under his jacket, and the taller one said, "Don't," like a mother. He didn't. He gave the smallest shake of his head, the international sign for, "Not here, not now." 2 more officers came through the front. Tasha had already hustled my baristas out the back with the dog, who hated rain so much that the sprinklers offended him on a molecular level. Evan's mother stood on a chair and said, "Evan," in a voice I will hear when I am dying, in that last minute when you remember what it sounded like when you were told that the world asks men to be a kind of brave that isn't goodness at all. Nobody drew anything more dangerous than a breath. The tall man looked at Mark for 3 seconds as if giving him the opportunity to be smart. He looked at Evan for another 2 like a reminder about promotions. Then he put his hands up in tiny, mocking theater and said to the officer closest to him, "We were just leaving." "You're staying," the officer said, "at least for a conversation." "Sure," he said. "We like conversation." He looked at me. "We'll finish ours later." I stepped closer to him than was wise. "I will not be spoken to like a receptionist in my own life," I said. "You will finish nothing." He smiled. "Everyone finishes something," he said. They went. Slowly, politely, escorted. The room breathed in, exhaled. The sprinklers clicked off with a little shrug as if they had always planned to. People began to laugh, some because they were alive, some because they were threats that couldn't think of anything more elegant. The officers took statements like sponges. Caleb took a towel to dry his notebook and didn't once look at me like he was disappointed I had not become a version of myself that would have made this easier. And then there was the last terrible work. Looking at a man you once loved so hard you broke ribs, making space for it and asking him to put his mouth around a truth. "We need the ledger," I told Mark. "We need the original. Give it to me, now." No one made a sound. He opened his mouth. He closed it. "Don't do it," I said. "Don't feed me later. Don't feed me for your own good. Don't carry me out of a fire and then tell me I should be grateful for the burn." He nodded. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and took out something wrapped in a plastic sleeve. He placed it on the table like it might break. The little book was ugly and practical, the paper cheap. It had the weight of a lie that learned to read. He stepped back. "Copy it," he said to Caleb. "Every page, then give it to the feds, the real ones, not the ones with nice hair." "Done," Caleb said. "And you?" "I run," he said. "The part I'm good at." "No," Lila said. She had not moved since the sprinklers. "You stay long enough to answer me. Did you ask Evan to get close to me?" Mark closed his eyes. "No," he said. "He worked for Keene. I'm the idiot who liked him." "What did you like?" she asked. "That he thought he could change the math," Mark said. "That he thought he could stand in a room with the kind of men who pay for other men's absence and still look at himself in a mirror and see a man. Did you ever stand in a room like that and tell yourself the same thing?" I asked. He looked at me, and there was a kind of mercy in that look that almost made me forgive him. "Every week," he said. "The next 24 hours were the kind of hours you know your body will remember without consulting your brain." Caleb made copies. The real agents came. They were quieter men and one woman with a bracelet tattoo and a notebook whose pages would not be thrown away. They took statements that became narratives and narratives that became points in a case. They collected the ledger like it was an animal that might bite. They listened to the voicemail and did not say, "That's impossible." I put the dress I no longer cared about into a bag like it had been a person and now needed dignity. Evan left with 2 officers and did not look back. His mother sat at my kitchen table and folded and unfolded a napkin while the kettle boiled, and then she put her head down and wept like a childhood she could not fix. I made tea the way women do when they cannot make amends. I gave her my hand and she took it like a rope. "I'm sorry," she said eventually, choking on it. I should have taught him that the kind of man who says orders instead of promise cannot be trusted to do anything except finish your food and leave before the check. It wasn't your job to teach him that, I said. Because it wasn't mine either, and I had done it anyway until I had nothing left to wrap his bad choices in. He's an adult. He made choices. He can make new ones. He will go to prison, she said. Probably, I said. The kind with time to think. She nodded. Good, she said. He needs practice. Mark stayed until just before dawn. We stood in the street in front of my house that had carried so many sandals and sprinklers and Christmas lights, it could have filed a complaint. He looked at the eaves like maybe he remembered how many times he had painted them. He put his hands in his pockets because he is a Whitman, and Whitmen do not know what to do with their hands when they are supposed to be sorry. I loved you, he said. I did. I know you did, I said. And you loved yourself more. He nodded. He didn't argue. I appreciated that. He looked at Lila over my shoulder as if asking permission to keep breathing. Can I see you? He asked her. Not yet, she said, and she did not smile. There's a difference between forgiveness and friendship. One takes a minute, the other takes a map. I'll draw, he said. Then he turned and walked into a morning that had not asked for him back. The weeks after were noise and clean edges. The story was a snack for local reporters for about 36 hours and then a meal for a national outlet for another 12. Words like allegedly became the air around us. People brought casseroles like grief and scandal were the same weather. The shop lost 2 customers and gained 4 because the math of sympathy is never neat. Lila went to therapy with a woman who asked beautiful questions she had to answer with ugly truths, and week by week she began to sleep again without waking up angry. She volunteered at the shelter, walking a dog that had decided it did not want to be held by anyone but the woman with the pink leash. She wrote to Evan in jail because her heart is a stupid, brave thing, and he wrote back because he'd never learned that the right way to be a man is to be a person. He said he was sorry. That is not the same as being different. It is a start. Caleb found excuses to be near us that did not look like hovering. He came by the shop with pastries because he claimed he had forgotten how to bake and wanted me to remind him. He sat in the corner sometimes and read cheap thrillers like sacred texts. He carried my new espresso machine up the stairs when the old one decided I needed humility. He never once asked for gratitude, but always took it when I offered it, like a person who understands that thanks is a gift, and the correct answer to a gift is yes. The ledger became a case. The case became an indictment. The indictment became a plea because men like Graham hire lawyers who are smart enough to stop the bleeding before it becomes an amputation. He will go to prison longer than Evan. He will wear his sentence like an inconvenience and pretend it is a sacrifice. Men like this are not interesting to me anymore. Mark did what he said he would. Stayed gone. He sent 2 letters, both through a lawyer who did not sign his name. He said he was working with the people whose job it is to make equations out of the places where we pour our feelings. He said he was sorry that he loved us in a way that required us to be brave. He said he understood if the answer was no. I wrote back one word, understood. It looks like a consent and is actually a boundary. One evening, 6 months after the party, I closed the shop at dusk and stood at the river wall watching a barge slide west. The light was the kind that makes good men look like liars and bad men look like art. The dog leaned against my shins. Tasha stood next to me and offered me a piece of gum like we were teenagers who knew where to get our hands on something better and were choosing not to. You know what I've been thinking about? She asked. What? The voicemail. The words. I didn't answer. He said, "It's worse than you think," she said. I've been trying to decide if that was true. And I think it was better, she said, because now you know. It is possible to feel gratitude and grief at the same time and not drown. It is possible to have your house broken into by a stranger who knows your first kiss's middle name and still believe in locks. It is possible to stand on a riverbank and forgive a man who isn't there, and then forgive yourself for the years you spent calling denial forgiveness because you needed to get out of bed. I went home. Lila was in the kitchen puzzling over a plant she had rescued from the clearance rack, the kind of plant that makes you earn it. She looked up. "We're out of sugar," she said. "We'll live," I said. She grinned. "Teach me your coffee foams." Hold the picture like you're shaking a baby's hand, I told her. You want to be gentle enough to be trusted and firm enough to be remembered. Like love, she said. Like boundaries, I said. We grinned like the joke had brought us back from someplace we shouldn't have gone alone. We made cappuccinos and drank half of them and reheated the halves twice because we kept stopping the microwave to talk. The dog sighed as if forgiving us our inability to finish anything correctly. Later, when the house was quiet and the river sang its dark song, I lay in bed on the cold side because some habits are more intimate than any other thing a body can do with itself. I closed my eyes. I saw Mark in the doorway of a room that wasn't mine and chose not to follow him. I saw Evan in a room with a window that did not open, writing to my daughter and asking questions no one had asked him kindly before. I saw my brother-in-law in a chair in my cafe, asleep with a thriller open on his chest, mouth open a little like a boy's, finally safe enough to be unhandsome. I saw a ledger closing and a new one opening. I saw rain. In the morning, the shop filled with the usual suspects. Old men argued about whether the mariners would ever stop breaking their hearts, and I did not tell them that all love is a risk. A teenager asked for recommendations, and I handed her a book that would break her, just enough to make room for better things. A man bought 2 scones and tried to flirt, and I smiled and didn't give him the discount he didn't earn. Lila laughed at something at the sink, and the sound did not make my stomach hurt. At noon, a small, nondescript envelope arrived with no return label. Caleb brought it to me like a peace offering. I opened it and took out a Polaroid. A lighthouse in late light. The back said, Pharos, and underneath, in a hand I knew better now than ever, a sentence. You don't owe me a thing, but I owe you a quiet. I put it in the drawer with the corkscrew and the dish towels because that is where things that are still alive enough to need using should go. I poured myself coffee. I stood in my own kitchen. I breathed. Here is what I have learned. Ghosts don't live in the river. They live in unanswered questions. And sometimes, if you are very lucky and very brave and a little unkind in exactly the right places, you get to exercise them in front of witnesses who will hold you to the woman you promised yourself you would become and remind you that love means both soft hands and hard lines. I heard my dead husband's voice on my daughter's phone, and in the years since, I have learned to listen for my own. 3 days later, I drove to Cape Disappointment with Lila. It's a short trip, but a long one between mother and daughter. The lighthouse sat like a fact. We walked the trail without hurry. The wind did what it always does. Tried to talk sense into the trees. We stood at the end and watched 3 freighters make the turn. Their names were ordinary. None of them were impossible. That felt like the point. Do you want to leave something? Lila asked. No, I said. I want to take something. What? A picture of you, I said, so I can hand it to myself next time I forget where the north is. She rolled her eyes. You're allowed to be corny, she said. Then softer. Thank you for not marrying your ghosts. I married a cafe, I said. It's less moody. We laughed. We took the picture. We drove home with the windows open, even though it wasn't quite warm enough. When we got to the house, there were 2 packages on the porch. Coffee filters and a book I had ordered in a version that would smell like glue. There was also an envelope with no writing on it. Inside was a key. I held it. I knew this shape without knowing which lock it wanted. Lila looked at me. If you want me to throw it in the river, she said, say it. No, I said. I slid the key into the drawer with the dish towels and the Polaroid and closed it. We keep all the keys, I said. We just decide which doors we want to open. Months later, at the end of summer, we held a party at the cannery again. Not an engagement. Not anything except a reason to ask people to bring their hearts to a room and take home something that made their kitchens kinder. We played music and didn't make speeches. Tasha kissed a woman under the old exit sign and later pretended the sign was a joke about fate. Caleb danced with a child who insisted he was bad at it and proved himself a liar. Maureen sent a card with a return address I will always save. Evan wrote from a prison that smelled like old paint and let himself be a person on a piece of paper. He asked if we could forgive him. Lila wrote back and said, "Not yet," and then, "Maybe." She didn't owe him either sentence. She wrote them anyway because she wants to be someone better than the men who taught her how to be afraid. I stood at the river door with a plate in my hand and watched a new tug push a useless barge into a place where it could be useful. The sky had that Pacific Northwest guilt about the way it holds sunlight hostage. The evening felt like a promise to witnesses. Tasha slid beside me. "You did it," she said. "What?" "Found a way to make a happy ending without the part where you pretend it didn't hurt." "I didn't do it," I said. "It did me." She snorted. "Okay, Whitman." She went back to the room. I stayed. I breathed in river and yeast and old brick. I stayed long enough to hear the water ask the same question it always asks. "What did you learn?" I learned that nothing is as reliable as a small, competent list written at midnight by a woman who refuses to be ambulanced to a life she didn't consent to. I learned that the sentence, "I'm not dead," is both a sin and a sacrament, depending on who says it and why. I learned that the people who save you do not always wear the clothes you like, and that sometimes the person you need at your kitchen table is the man who once refused your mashed potatoes. I learned that love and boundaries share an address. I went back inside, wiped down a table, kissed my daughter's cheek because she let me, and set a new key on the counter next to the register. No label, no lock. Some nights, when the fog sits on the river like a cat, a ship horn calls down the valley, and if you're the kind of person who believes in ghosts, you can hear it say your name. When it does, go to your drawer, take out your keys, count them. Then choose the door you want to open, and if a voice calls from a phone and says it's worse than you think, believe the part that invites you to look harder and throw away the part that invites you to disappear. My husband's voice came back to warn me, and I did the most radical thing a woman can do with a warning. I used it to build a life that didn't require one.